If you look at the numbers behind incontinence in women, it's hard to believe just how big an issue it is. Incontinence affects more women than diabetes, breast cancer, and heart disease, but it doesn't get nearly the attention it deserves. That's why the National Association for Continence has created the We Count campaign to help you realize that this isn't just a you problem, it's an us problem. There are treatments available right now that can make a real difference in your life, and we invite you to take action today. Visit nafc.org/we-count for essential facts, insights, and resources on stress and urge incontinence, overactive bladder, menopause-related leakage, and more. That's nafc.org/we-count to learn more and discover that there truly is strength in numbers.
Welcome to Life Without Leaks, a podcast by the National Association for Continence. NAFC is America's leading advocate for people with bladder and bowel conditions, with resources, connections to doctors, and a welcoming community of patients, physicians, and caregivers, all available at nafc.org. This podcast is supported by our sponsor partner Medtronic, maker of the InterStim systems for bladder and bowel control. To learn more about InterStim therapy, visit talkleaks.com. Welcome back to another episode of Life Without Leaks. I'm your host, Bruce Cassover, and joining us today is Hannah, who has a very interesting personal story to share with us. She's also an ambassador for Medtronic, the maker of InterStim therapy. So welcome, Hannah. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to hear your story. We always love to speak to people who have personal things to tell. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I am 41. I work in bioinformatics and still going to school that will probably continue forever. And I was diagnosed with overactive bladder at the age of 33.
Now, I'm sure that was not something you ever imagined you'd have to deal with. It's certainly not at the age of 33.
No, definitely not. And that diagnosis came immediately following a radical hysterectomy. So I was really not prepared for any of that. And, having that at such a young age too was just kind of compounded everything. And so after the hysterectomy, I stayed in the hospital for significantly longer than you should after having that. And that's when the problem became apparent that, this was overactive bladder. And when I say overactive, I meant that I was going to the bathroom every half hour. And even though I was going so often, I would also have leaking in between. So it was very much like this very leaky faucet that we really didn't know what to do with.
Wow, that whole thing sounds like traumatic, really. I mean, you're talking about a major surgery and you have complications that nobody wants to have afterwards.
Yes, it was really difficult to navigate that portion of my life. And I was also looking to establish myself in a career and also trying to navigate dating after having the hysterectomy and also being diagnosed with the overactive bladder. And so that was really difficult too, because I'm like, okay, do I tell somebody before first date that I pee myself? Does that not get me a first date? Do I talk about it during the first date while we're at dinner? Is that okay to discuss? Because I'm sure that it looks really ridiculous if I'm just excusing myself every half hour to go to the bathroom. It probably looks like I'm trying to escape a date or something like that. So
Yeah, I can imagine.
It was all very complicated and frustrating and difficult to try to deal with.
I'm sure, but I guess it's also like a filter, because if once you do spring the news, depending on how they react, if it's somebody that you want to, continue seeing, or, what, time's up, I'll go find somebody else.
Right. So it's like, okay, well, does that say something about someone who's not willing to deal with that? Is that, it's not really, a common occurrence for someone in their 30s to have this issue anyway. So, what am I really expecting from someone who's like 35? Like it's tough, like I can't blame someone for not wanting to deal with this with me. But, I was just hoping that someone would recognize that this is not the sum of my parts and that this is just something that I come with, but that it's not my entire, personality.
Maybe it's a little personal, but have you been successful finding a person or people who are accepting?
Yes, yes. I'm now happily married for 7 years now? No,
Mazel
we've been
tov.
together well, thank you. We've been together 7, married for 4. It's actually our 4-year anniversary is coming up in August. So, yeah.
That's excellent. I'm glad to hear that. But even then, sure, I guess, your online dating profile, you have to, sort of think about, do I add this as a line? For people who do find themselves in this situation, do you have any recommendations? How should they go about that?
Yeah. So for me, I was lucky enough to start working in the hospital when I was hospitalized after the hysterectomy with a urologist. But I know that's not the case for everyone because not everybody is hospitalized after having this diagnosis. So, you know, I would say that if you are experiencing these types of issues, to seek out a urologist, and that it might be difficult too in finding someone who's a good match for you, in the same way that, you're looking for a good partner who's going to listen to you and understand you as you're going through this. You need to find a physician. Like it's almost like dating. You need to find a physician who is willing to also listen to you and work with you rather than talking at you and saying, what would be best for you. So I did start working with a physician in the hospital, and then once I was discharged, and then I got a new job. So then I was also relocating. So then I had to do this whole dating thing again in finding a good physician who was a good match for me. And that's when we really started to explore treatment options for this and really have frank conversations about what my life looks like or how it could look once we got to a point where we both agreed that something was working.
Before we even talk about treatment options, tell me, what was it like starting a new job having this issue?
So it's been awkward. Luckily we did not mention where I work. So, there were times where I would have accidents at work and I would excuse myself from the middle of a meeting and come back and be wearing completely different clothes because I just soaked through everything. And
Just
or
have to pretend you're a superhero and that you just did the quick change.
Yes, exactly, right? Like the Superman underneath of my, like, button-up shirt.
That's it.
Exactly. Right, and you can't recognize me because I'm wearing the glasses, but then once I take them off, like, oh my goodness, a totally different person.
It's
Um,
true, but it did have to be awkward, I would imagine. I mean, because yeah, you feel like you have to explain yourself or not explain yourself. What's the right answer for that?
so I chose not to explain myself, and, I at that point, I was just like, whatever you want to make up about what is going on with me, like, that's great, and that's on you because, it is really embarrassing and isolating to have to go through this, and it was a new job, so I didn't want to complicate things or make it seem like I was unreliable. And that's not ever the message that I received from my employer, but that's the message that I was telling myself, unfortunately, which
Mhm.
is really unfair as well. But that, if I was leading a meeting or doing like an orientation or something like that for like someone who, was new to our department, I would excuse myself from the meeting and say, "Okay, I'll be right back, like, talk amongst yourselves," and that's how, I would handle that. But knowing that I had just leaked or that, like, I had a full-on accident and things like that. So then, I'm hyper aware of those types of situations and that I would always bring pads with me to work, an extra change of clothes, extra undies. Like I had a bag. And so I would, just make sure of all of that as well. And I was commuting by train, and the train time was longer than like what my limit was for the bathroom. So the train ride was never a success either. So then, as soon as I got to the train station, I'm pushing past people to like run to the bathroom to like change a pad and things like that. So this was all like a weird navigation time for me, and being a new employee and trying to be a good employee, and what I thought that looked like, while sparing people the details of what I was going through.
I'm hearing something else underneath also, and tell me if this sounds true or if I'm just making something up. But what I'm also hearing is that, we walk around with this image of ourselves in our heads, who we picture we are. And, when incontinence happens to somebody and they're a senior, nobody wants to have this issue, but it's not nearly as surprising as when it happens to you and you're a young person. And nobody thinks that as a young person they're going to have this. How did it affect your sort of sense of self and your inner life? What sort of an impact did it have that way?
That's that's an excellent question, and also a really great observation. I think it's really hard to just feel good about yourself when you're constantly peeing yourself. And I know that I definitely struggled with self-esteem during that time. And I I felt like my body was like failing me, and that it was embarrassing, and I'm supposed to be young and healthy, and I'm I'm not. And that really did take a toll on how I felt about myself. And it's hard to carry an air of confidence at work as well when something like that happens. So I was definitely dealing with thoughts of like imposter syndrome and things like that too, just because I'm trying to make a good impression, and I I know what I'm doing at work, and I feel like I should have a great grasp on things, but that little part in my mind is like, oh, well, you're constantly leaving meetings, and how are you, really absorbing all of the information as a new employee when you just need to excuse yourself all the time, and what does that look like to other people? So I felt I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I felt judgment, but it wasn't from other people. It was like this weird internal thing that I was trying to grapple with and navigate while just trying to hold it together pretty much.
I can imagine that had to be every day had to be a struggle then.
Yes, every day was totally a struggle, and it wasn't just about work either. It was just basing my entire life around where the next bathroom is going to be. And can I enjoy my nephew's birthday when it's at a park? And where's the bathroom at the park? I know that there was a McDonald's that I passed before I got there. So do I need to leave at some point and drive there? But that's probably going to be too late, and I'm already going to have an accident at that point too. So, you know, and going food shopping and knowing where the bathrooms are there. Okay, when I go to Target, I know that the bathrooms are right there. But if I go to Lowe's, for some reason, the bathrooms are in the bowels of the store by like the lumber yard or something like that. So, I had to learn all of these things, and everything just became like very bathroom centric.
So you had the radical hysterectomy, and you started to notice symptoms appear immediately.
Yeah.
And you went to see a urologist after that. How long did you continue having symptoms that you didn't seem to be able to get under control?
Yes. So we went the medication route initially, and I feel like I tried every medication for overactive bladder that was available on the market. And they would either work for me initially, and I would get very excited about it, and then they would fail me after about a month or just never start working at all. And some of them had some pretty nasty side effects as well, just constant thirst. And I'm like, isn't this counterintuitive to what I'm trying to combat?
It's exactly making you do the thing you don't want to do.
Yeah, exactly. And also like blurred vision and things like that. And I was like, well, that's not really going to work for me because I need to be like very sharp at work. And this isn't it. So then after doing the medications, then I did Botox injections in my bladder. I did that for about a year and a half and it worked. Sometimes it would work a little bit too well and I would have issues starting to go to the bathroom, which was pretty much the exact opposite of what I was going through previously. And I know that, being an ambassador and talking to other patients, that I do know that some folks have to use a catheter after having the Botox injections in order to just go to the bathroom. That was not the case for me, but it was still really difficult. So I would find myself just sitting in the bathroom for 10 or 15 minutes, just trying to push on my bladder to get it all out.
And out of the
And
frying pan into the fire.
exactly, exactly. So, and the problem with Botox too is that it wears off. So I know that some patients can get 8 and 9 months of relief with the Botox. But for me, just because of how severe my overactive bladder was, I was getting the injections every like 3 to 4 months and taking time off of work to go get the injections, dealing with the aftermath of that, and then also dealing with urinary retention sometimes with the Botox injections, and then
Mhm.
developing frequent UTIs because of that. So it just became this thing that just wasn't sustainable. So I went to the doctor and was like, I've been doing this for like a year and a half now. And before that, it was like a year of medications. And am I just supposed to do Botox injections from like 35 to 85? Like what's really the plan here? And that's when she talked to me about the inner stim and the bladder stimulator.
Yes, no, you weren't familiar with that at all beforehand, were you?
No, I had never heard of it before. And with my age bracket, this is not really something that's like widely discussed. So when I was telling my friends that, I have this overactive bladder issue and with the leaks and everything like that, everyone would be like, "Oh, that's really terrible, but we can't relate." So, in learning about the inner stim at the age of 35, it was like, "Okay, well, again, I'm just kind of on my own and doing this." And yeah, it wasn't until I told a colleague of mine about it that he was like, "Oh yeah, my dad had that done like 20 years ago. This is like the thing." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'd never heard of it before." But yeah, so the doctor had explained to me the trial period and what that looks like, and then the permanent implant should I decide to go through with it. And I think that I was just so excited that something was actually going to work that I didn't ask any questions. So I was like, yes, let's do it. And so I had it done. I had the trial done in a surgery center. And when I woke up from it, I was like, "Oh my goodness, what did I agree to?" Because I had a nylon belt around my waist with a battery pack and some wires, and they were all taped up and things like that. And then a very nice nurse came to me and she was like, "Oh, by the way, you can't shower the entire time that you have this. You can't get the battery wet." And I was like, "Okay, well, I did not prepare for any of this. This is my fault because I didn't ask any questions. So now I guess my colleagues just have to deal with me being a little bit smelly this week as I go through this." So, but I did it. I went through the trial period and we did need to make some adjustments to my stimulation level in order to get things situated to a place where I thought it would match what like a quote unquote normal person's bathroom schedule would look like. So I was able to make it to like the 3 and 4 hour mark without having to go to the bathroom. And that to me was just amazing because of all that I'd been through previously. I didn't think that I would get to that part of it.
Now, this is very cool. For people who are not familiar with the interstim, what it is a little, it's about the size of a $half, and it has a little wire that is attached, that gets attached to a nerve inside of your body, the sacral nerve, because brain bladder communication is a real thing, and it actually affects how you go to the bathroom. And if you can improve brain bladder communication through a little bit of electrical stimulation, you find that people with symptoms like overactive bladder see real improvement. So you get this as a trial. So they don't actually implant the device yet. You have it sort of on the outside. You can't get it wet. And the coolest thing you just said is that you could like dial in. You have to work with them, but you could dial in exactly how much relief you want, which is like science fiction to me.
It's pretty amazing. And they give you what looks like a cell phone in order to control the device. It was incredibly easy to use, but you can't make phone calls on it or anything. I think there's only 2 apps on the phone. One is to control the stimulation level, and the second is locked, like clinician password type of thing.
I think you're probably a little too young, but it sounds like you're sort of like the $6 million man or the bionic woman. Yeah, you just sort of control exactly how much you want. I'm wondering, the stimulation, could you feel it? I mean, did you feel something?
Yes. So it feels almost like a internal vibration in like your bicycle seat area, but it's incredibly discreet. So no one can hear you outside vibrating. So no one really knows that I have this unless I tell them. But it's not the type of vibration that will take you out of your daily routine. It's not intrusive in that regard. And it's pretty amazing now. So I've been a patient for about 6 years. And it's amazing what the brain will forget and what it will adapt to, because at this point, I don't feel the vibration at all unless I really concentrate on it. And then there it is, it's working. So it just works very nicely in the background for you. And you don't need to have that cell phone within range in order for the device to continue to work.
It doesn't pick up like AM radio stations from, across the country or anything.
No, I can't like open my mouth and like a John Mayer song comes out. It's not cool like that.
And see, but imagine if you could, that would be awesome too.
It would be a really great party trick. Yeah, I'm
I
I'm a
would think
little
so.
upset about that.
Yes. So now tell me this. You get the implant and you said you had to make some adjustments to it. But how quickly could you tell that, yeah, this is going to be a solution for me?
So for the first like 3 days, it was working pretty well, but not well enough for me. So I had some relief initially. So it did start working immediately for me, but I wanted more time in between my bathroom breaks. So that's when I talked to my Medtronic representative and we made, a joint decision to bump up the stimulation level pretty considerably. And then that's when I felt that relief at like the 3.5 and 4 hour mark. So it did work initially for me, but it just wasn't to my standards of what I thought a normal person's schedule would be.
So you get it calibrated the way you want. You have the actual implant put in. Do you have to do anything else? Or are you just like free and clear now?
I am free and clear now. So I went through with the permanent implant and I'm actually on my second battery at this point. The first battery that I had was a 5-year battery because that's where the tech was at that time. And now I'm on a newer battery. I should be able to get about 10 years of life in this, I think. And yeah, I'm pretty much good to go. I've also been leak free now for about 6 years as well. So that once I made that initial adjustment during the trial period, I haven't had any leaks since, which is it's wild. It's crazy to me that happened because I was just so used to pads and waking up all the time overnight and, you know, having car rides not be a success and having work meetings not be a success and things like that. So it's pretty amazing. So now I just have to go to the urologist once a year, and I bring the little phone with me and she puts in her password and tests my battery level, and then I get to go on living my life, and it's pretty amazing.
I imagine that you probably have a happier outlook on things than almost anybody else your age because you have something to compare it to that you people really do. I mean, you must have a perspective on things, the ability to appreciate being able to travel, for example, and things like that, that people just don't have.
Yes. Traveling by plane is a pleasure now. I can sit in the middle seat and be okay and not have to worry about things. So that's okay too. And yeah, I definitely have the before and after perspective, and that I know what it was like to go through this, but now I also know what it's like to not have to be that way anymore. And it's night and day how amazing this has been.
Wow, that's really, really, I'm so happy to hear that. And what I really hope is that people take your words to heart and really take active steps to try and find solutions for themselves also, because you're living proof that regardless of your age, regardless of your physique, your health, anything, you can find yourself encountering these sorts of problems, and you could also find yourself overcoming them. So it's really inspiring. I love hearing that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And this diagnosis that definitely does not discriminate, and that it can definitely happen to anyone of any age or gender, and that there are solutions that can work for you.
So now you're an ambassador for Medtronic. So
Yeah.
you have sort of a responsibility to evangelize the InterStim solution for people. Do you get the chance to meet a lot of people who are like you, people who are on the younger side who've maybe gone through have a similar background?
Yeah. So I have now talked to about 287 patients as an ambassador. I started this last year, and I talked to folks of all ages, and it's, really interesting to hear how similar our stories are, in that, we're going through this, and it's an incredibly embarrassing time, and that, we're trying to navigate social situations. So, obviously everyone's situation is unique, but I think that the feelings behind having something like this are very, very similar. And it does seem to impact folks emotionally more, I think, the younger that they are. I've talked to patients who are 18 and they have been on the phone with their parents while, having the conversation with me. And the outlook of, I have my whole life ahead of me, but there's this thing that's blocking me from attending college, or, that's blocking me from establishing good relationships at an age where it's really important. So different situations, but very similar emotional aspects to it. And, I definitely talk to a lot more women than men as an ambassador, but that, a lot of women who I've talked to, I was lucky in that I received help initially in the hospital for this, but that, I'm talking to women who tell me that they've been dealing with this for 20 years, and now they're finally taking control and seeking out assistance through a doctor. And so I think that there's an aspect too that we're, as women, we're kind of expected to suffer in silence about things, or that folks tend to think that, as we age, this might be something that just happens naturally, but it's definitely not. Like my my grandmother, lived well into her 80s, and this never happened to her. And so, I think that there's that aspect of it as well, that, we're just, expected to kind of deal with things and just buy the pads and, just try to navigate life while also dealing with that. And it's hard. And, I think too, as an ambassador, that it makes people feel really good to hear that someone else has gone through this. Like, yep, I suffered in many of the same ways that you did. And, that really, I think, is helpful to people, just to let them know that there's someone else out there that has definitely gone through, a very similar experience to them.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to ask actually is how do they feel knowing that, oh, there is somebody else out there who's like, I'm not the only one? Because you talked about how isolating it could be. And
Yeah.
it's got to be very depressing because of that.
Yeah. So, I let people know that, I've talked to a bunch of other patients, and that, we're a strong but silent group of people who have definitely, gone through this same situation as them. And I think that that does something to people, that, it makes them know that they're not alone in this, and that I can empathize with the feelings of isolation and the self-confidence issues that go along with this. But that, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, whatever that light looks like for them. And that, I hope that they, continue to pursue what's going to work.
Yeah, that's why this podcast is really, I think, really important is because, at the time you're talking with people, they're already actively looking at solutions. They've reached a point in their journey
Yes.
where they're just about there.
Yeah.
But there are so many people who aren't even close to that. Like you said, people who've been years and years and years. I think, you were talking about how women are sort of conditioned to just suck it up and, we're just gonna deal with it and that's it. I'm not gonna be a complainer. I also think compounds, and tell me if this also sounds like it's true, is the fact that there are things out there that can help you just get by enough, so that you do have some pads and some other things that you could use that could sort of help put a Band-Aid on the situation, but don't really solve the problem. So it's easy to sort of, muddle through without trying to take the next bigger step. Does that sound like it's familiar, or am I just making something up?
No, you're definitely not making that up. And that, that's, essentially, why a lot of these products exist in the first place is Band-Aids are Band-Aids. And that's, what they're there for. And folks might not also know that there are solutions, right? Like, we can be, doing the work, but not know that there's bioinformatics. Like, so we can, look at an electronic health record and think, oh my goodness, there's got to be so many ways to manipulate this to make it work better for me as a physician. Well, that's informatics. But we can be doing the work and not know that there's a word for it, or that there's a program for it, or that it's even a full career for people. So when, you see these products in stores, that might be your only solution, because that's what is presented to you. You might not know that there are other options out there for you. So, I think that it's really good that this podcast exists to let folks know that, that the frontline worker that is the pad is not where the treatment necessarily needs to end. The pad and the depends are basically like the EMTs, and that they can transport you to something that's going to get you potentially better results and more help.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That sounds right. Also, when we talk about how, you reach out to these people and you give them a voice that they can talk to and show them that they're not alone. And these are people who are already sort of on their journey. When we do want to talk to reach out to those people who haven't even started, haven't gotten that far yet, one thing I do want to do is give a little bit of a shameless plug to the National Association for Continence's website. It's nafc.org. And when you go there, you'll see that we actually have message boards where people who are just on their journey, who are well along the way, who found solutions, where healthcare workers and caregivers can all ask questions and share advice and share insights. And certainly, if you're listening to this and you're new and you wish you had an ambassador, somebody who could help you understand your journey a little bit more, we absolutely welcome you to go to the message boards and ask your questions there and find a community. But I guess you are the community for these people. And how well do they receive you? I mean, are they excited to hear from you? Are they a little nervous? I mean, do they not believe that they're really going to find a solution?
That's a great question. I've talked to folks who cry and thank me for my time in talking to them. I have folks who are skeptical, forget that they made an ambassador appointment and think that I'm a telemarketer. And then, we both laugh about that and then, continue on the conversation. But, I think that it's really well received and that for the most part, people are very grateful that this ambassadorship exists and that, just me sharing my experience does give folks hope that, there could be a good solution for them.
I love hearing that. That's great. So now, the name of the podcast is Life Without Leaks. And what we do at the end of every podcast is we do like to ask our guests to share one little bit of advice, a hint, a tip, a strategy, a thought, a pearl of wisdom about how people who are listening can live a life without leaks. So I'm wondering if you might have one that you could share with us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to be a self advocate and to have the difficult conversations with your physician. I know that there's a lot of shame and embarrassment that can be associated with what you're going through, but that there are solutions out there. So if you're able to have these conversations, then you might be able to have a life without leaks. So I think that, having the strength to talk about what's important to you and what your goals are for your health and find a physician who will work with you is going to be the best thing for you.
That sounds like capital advice. So thank you very much. And I hope that people take it to heart as well. And I want to thank you for giving the time and sharing your story and giving some inspiration and maybe some motivation to folks out there who really need it. So I genuinely want to thank you. And I can't tell you how much we appreciate you being so open and honest with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Life Without Leaks has been brought to you by the National Association for Continence. This podcast was supported by our sponsor partner Medtronic, makers of the InterStim systems for bladder and bowel control. To learn more about InterStim therapy, visit talkleaks.com. Our music is Rainbows by Kevin MacLeod and can be found online at incompetech.com.